Right. You know the score, guys. Let's just give it a minute. Give a chance for everyone to log on who wants to watch this, and just see if everything's running okay. And we'll give everyone a chance in the chat to log on. If you are around, please do type in. Please do say hi on the chat thread. Let me know that my stream's working okay. We have had a few technical hiccups in the past, so let's just try and get everything online properly before I start, because this might be quite a long video. There's quite a lot to go through in this one. So hi if you're there. If you're not yet, tell people to get on there. A few people have been asking to see this one. How's it going, Adrian? You alright? Good, good to see one person's on at least. Hopefully we'll get a couple more. I'll just shut down that page. Hello, Mr. Butler. Thanks very much for disturbing my pixel pushing, you bugger. Well, you don't have to watch it. Hello, Mark. Thanks for joining us, mate. This is a video I know you're going to want to see, because me and you had a discussion about this not so long back. So you're going to be pleased to know that I've managed to work out all the fine details. And I believe this is going to be the first video talking about this, specifically on this platform, that's going to be on YouTube. So I think it's going to be a good resource point for a lot of people. It's an unusual subject, Simon. This one, it's again, it's one of those obscure systems that not everybody's got, not everyone's heard of, not everyone's familiar with. So just give it a second. I'm just gonna have me a quick drink. Got the it's gone sunny again today, which is nice. Not too hot, so I've broke out the nice frosty cider. So hello, Mr. Owen. How you doing? Right, I think that is everyone now, guys. So we should be okay. Forgive any sound interruptions. People are being noisy outside because the sun's out again, and I'm rattling the things around on the table. But I'll do my best to try and keep everything composed. But anyway, hi, how you doing? Hope you're all good. I will address you in the chat as I go, but I'm going to try not to break up my flow too much once I go on. That's why I'm getting the pleasantries kind of out the way right now. But I will address any questions you've got as we go if I think they're relevant. And I'll have a scroll back through the chat as and when needed. Can you all hear me okay? I always have to do a bit of a sound check, because even though I've got a sound meter on here, you can never always tell if the sound's getting across okay. If the volume on the actual game is too low as well, I can always bump that up or knock it down. So please do speak up if there's a problem with the audio. So, what we're going to be covering today, guys, is this, which obviously you can see it just in shot there. I will be moving around just to show you the actual system itself. This is the great stuff. This is the Sony KDL22PX300, otherwise known as the PlayStation 2 television. And the reason, well, obviously it's got the strange name, which isn't very catchy, because that's just how TV manufacturers kind of brand their systems, if you know what I mean. But yeah, that is its official title, the KDL22PX300. 22, of course, referring to the actual screen size. It's a 22-inch widescreen. PX300 is obviously just the actual model number, and KDL being the actual product line. It is from the Sony Bravia range. Obviously, the Sony Bravia TVs have had a pretty good reputation over the years, and the picture is pretty good on these systems anyway. The system is dated from 2010, and what makes it unique, of course, is that it's not just a Sony Bravia TV, but even though we never had many over the years, different manufacturers have actually made systems, TVs with integrated consoles. And Nintendo, of course, did a couple. They did the Sharp SF1, which was the Super Nintendo TV. They also did an earlier one, I can't remember the exact name of it, which was a NES TV. They did a PC Engine one, a CDI one, and of course there's the Diver's Dreamcast. Those, of course, were all CRTs, because that was appropriate for the time. Now, this system is a bit of a peculiarity for some people. even in the line of console-based TVs, and that is because obviously it's using an LCD TV. What's also a bit strange is that, of course, the Sony PS2 came out at a time when we were in a transition period. We were moving from the old CRTs into widescreen, sorry, the old 4 to 3 aspect CRTs into widescreen, and of course around the same time we were moving into flat screens. And the PS2, having one of the longest lives of all, all consoles, spanned quite a generation. However, the majority of the games, in fact all of the games, were designed with 4 to 3 aspect entirely in mind. So some people have asked, well, why does this exist? And I'll go over the finer points. We'll just sit down for a second. I'll go over the finer points in a minute and show you what's on there. But I'll just explain quickly where its place fits. The PlayStation 2, of course, released in 2001, if I'm not mistaken. Might have been 2000. Hot on the heels of the Dreamcast, obviously. The Dreamcast very much, marking the end of the millennium, 1999, year 2000 coming. And of course, outclassed by Sony because the PS2 came along with its DVD player. Not many people had DVD players at the time. It was much more of a multimedia machine, whereas the Dreamcast was just like a gaming machine. And of course, the PlayStation 2 was it was one of the best-selling consoles of all time, and that was because it had a lot of games. It did unfortunately get a lot of shovelware over the years, but it was one of those platforms that it was the first to kind of be widely adopted in general homes under the TV. It would live there as part of your entertainment system rather than just be a games console. And obviously, over the years, it went through several iterations. The most notable, of course, it went from being the big fat PS2s going down to the slim PS2s, and its official lifespan ended, I believe, in 2014. I think it was 2015. When it was actually discontinued. I think the very last title produced for it was a FIFA game, as you would expect, and I think it was FIFA 14. It could be FIFA 16. It might have been as late as that, but it had, probably a good 14, 15-year run as a console. Even though it wasn't widely used right up until that time, it was still like a budget system, and still, maybe like a hand-me-down console when people moved up to the PS3. But of course, by the time we reached 2014, the PS4 was widely available by that point. So, it wasn't, you're going 2 generations back. Now, the reason this exists and the reason it's in such an unusual profile is because, obviously, at that point, Sony had only been producing slimline PS2s for several years. Because they obviously replaced the big fat bulky PS2s, which there was no real need for anymore. They trimmed them down and revised that several times. I think all in all there was something like 20 board revisions or something like that the slimline went through. And this pretty much represents the very back end of that. Now, the reason it exists, and as an anomaly, rather than being Japan only, like a lot of the integrated TV consoles were, this was actually a PAL only. So this is something, quite rare and exclusive to the world that actually only found its way to our region, which is, and it's a nice footnote there in gaming history, that we actually got something exclusive and unusual. And the reason that happened is because once you got to 2010, by then the PS2 was having, a really extended life. But obviously Sony was still manufacturing them in millions of units because it went all over the more like the developing world and places like that where they couldn't afford the newer consoles like the PS3 and the PS4. It would have had widespread exposure, and most of those territories were probably PAL. So of course they created a lot of PAL motherboards for slimline consoles. But because people were no longer really buying the console itself, they had to find a way to use them all up. So obviously that is where this came from. Now, a lot of people would probably ask why it's in the profile it is. If you look, the TV itself is just a standard TV. And slightly garishly, I would say, it's just kind of bolted on top of this custom elongated stand. Now, people have seen integrated DVD TVs over the year. You would usually find a TV with an integrated DVD system. The DVD player would be integrated into, like the back of the TV, and you insert the disc from the side because obviously that allows for wall mounting. It allows it to take advantage of it being like a slimline TV and being able to sit flat against the wall. And it's like, why didn't they do that? Well, obviously, because they were actually using components directly intended for the PlayStation Slimline, it wasn't that easy to integrate those into the back of a TV where you've got heat generation, you need to dissipate heat. They were pretty much basic, DVD control mechanisms at this time. They weren't going to start reintroducing and manufacturing new, automated CD loading systems for a system when they were for a new system when they were just going to be trying to use up the old boards. And so they went with this weird hybrid where you've got the base, which is a little bit bigger than a slimline PS2. A slimline PS2 would probably look and be in about the same size as that section of the base itself, maybe a bit deeper. You can see the box section only goes so far back to where the actual stand of the TV goes, but this is kind of elongated instead. But if you look at the front and the location of the controller ports and the memory card ports along with the USB ports, you can see it is very close to that of the Slimline PS2, and that's because essentially it uses many of the same components. I suppose the reason they elongated it as well is because they were reusing components and it wasn't the most elegant thing. They needed to make something that was balanced as far as keeping the TV upright goes, as well as accessible, made practical for the use of accessing the DVD tray. Now this has got quite a funky system. Rather than obviously the Slimline PS2s did away with the sliding drawer mechanism and just went for a simple top loader. This is now different. However, you've got this rather cool little hideaway tray here, and you don't just pull it back. There's a little open button on the front which pops it open, and then that slides back like that, and you've got your standard DVD, CD, DVD drawer right there. So I mean, it's not super elegant. They probably could have gone a lot smoother if they had integrated into the back, but using the components they had, it does at least make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Obviously, it's finished in this kind of piano black finish, which befits the plastics of the TV, and it's not a bad looking system at all. A little bulkier than it needs to be, of course, but at least it kind of looks like it belongs. The stand goes quite chunky behind there. Excuse me. Let's lose my headphones. Sorry about that. Snag it on the table. Move around a bit smoother. If I just move around here, you'll see it goes to the side there. There's a little bit of bulk on the back, and if I just hold this in my ear very carefully as I hold the camera around there, you can see we've got around the back, we've got a few side components. We've got two HDMI ports on the side. You've got a USB port at the top, the obligatory PCMCIA socket at the top for updating, and then you've got a composite input lower down and a headphone jack. Around the back, we've got input for PC, we've got composite and component input, we've also got a SCART input around there, and two more HDMIs. That's 4 HDMIs in total, which is a lot even for a TV of today. HDMI, of course, only really becoming the standard around the mid to late 2000s. So, you're getting a lot of inputs on this TV, and being a gaming TV, that's obviously very appropriate. As far as the actual system goes, you power it on, and you've got your normal inputs on the TV as you'd expect. There's actually some physical controls on the right hand side there, as well as the remote. The remote's often missing when you pick these up, but thankfully I've got the remote for mine. It just looks like any other Sony remote, except obviously at the bottom you can see there it says TV and PlayStation, and at the top there you can see a few extra controls designed just for the PlayStation features. Now you have got a physical power button at the bottom of the unit, just there for the PlayStation element, and when you actually turn that on, it does automatically switch to the PlayStation channel, but you can obviously use your input selector there to change the channels as it goes. And I've set it so it doesn't actually recognise the inputs until you've got something plugged in. If we have a quick look there, you can see we've got the different options. So you've got analog and digital TV. It's got digital TV receiver inside it. Your 4 HDMI sockets, your SCART, your side RCA, your components, and then you've got a dedicated channel called PlayStation 2 and PC, which is actually the VGA input on the back. And you can set up settings for each of those channels individually on here. Rather cool as well. You've got a lot of functions to mess around with on the TV itself. If you press home, you're actually presented with an iteration of the cross media bar, which is quite cool. So this is probably the first PAL system. Well, actually, it wouldn't be because the PlayStation 3 was out quite a while before. But as far as console generations go, of course, the Sony PSX DVR, which was the PS2 DVR system, that was the first system to introduce the cross media bar to the PlayStation line, but obviously that was Japanese only. The PS3 technically came out before this, but this is a PS2 with the cross media bar, and this cross media bar is based heavily on that of the cross media bar found on the PSX DVR. So you can see, as well as your options for video and music and photos and your settings and things like that, you've got your digital, your analog and your digital channels on here. This TV, before I had it, was used as a TV. I haven't even got an aerial on our house anymore, so we can't plug this in to test this. We could use this kind of standalone digital aerial, but they're naff, and I'm not going to use in that context anyway, so there's no real point. Honestly, obviously all the analog channels have now gone off air anyway, so the analog channel is pointless. But all the channels there are saved, and it does actually have a network input, and you can actually get a wireless dongle for this, which basically makes it smart TV. If I go across here, you can see some of the TV services that have been downloaded to this. So we've got Demand 5, Sky News, Love Film, Yup, and was that Mubi, Sony Entertainment Television. Not all of these things are online anymore. Some of them are. Obviously, you've got things like YouTube on there. You've got Billabong, Break.com, Wired. I think the most annoying thing was, I don't know if it's the YouTube, I know it's actually the BBC iPlayer. This has got BBC iPlayer on here, but it was never coded properly, so it doesn't actually work. So even if you do hook this up to the internet, that actually doesn't work. And I've just noticed that the chat thread has stopped. I know you're probably just listening to me, but I'm just going to check that this is still running. So give me 1 second, guys. So I am checking because it is a Saturday, and obviously things tend to choke a little bit on the Saturday, the internet feed and that. So I'm just checking this is still running. Might be good if some of you actually chime in occasionally just to let me know if it is still running. Let's jump to it. If you are there, do type in the chat and tell me you're there. Every so often it just lets me know that the chat thread is running okay and that the stream hasn't broken down completely. Tend to choke a little bit on the Saturday, the internet feed and that, so I'm just checking this is still running. Okay, so it looks like we are still online. Chime in occasionally just to let me know if it is still good running. Stuff, right? If I do miss some of the thanks Mark. So thanks people. Yeah, cheers Adrian. I was just checking because usually people jump in quite a lot. So yeah, don't mind me. That was just me checking in. I'll leave that pause now in the background just in case. If you are there, do type in the chat and tell me you're there. Every so often it just lets me know that the chat thread is running okay and that the stream hasn't broken down completely. Right. Good stuff. Right, so continuing then, guys. Sorry about that. Yeah, you've got your usual options on there. Like I say, you've got your internet options. I can't show you any of those because I haven't got the wireless dongle for this. It would have been nice to try and show some of the online services for this, but you need one dedicated for the TV. I did try one of those portable, those really tiny plug-in USB Wi-Fi dongles, but it just doesn't work with this. You need the one that's designed specifically for this TV. I think it's to do with data encryption and stuff. They were very conscious that they didn't want people. They still do it with TVs now. My brand new Android TV in there, that has got restrictions on it which don't allow you to plug in certain USB devices because it doesn't want you recording movie channels and things like that off there. So it was obviously done for that reason. But you can just plug the network cable straight into the TV. The PlayStation itself also has a network connection on there, so you can actually get onto online services with this. But most of those servers are shut down now, and not many things really utilise a network cable on the PlayStation 2, so not really a big deal. And then obviously from here you've got your typical options like your system settings. You can set the region, the time, date, all that kind of stuff. Not really essential for the way you're going to use this anyway. But it's just quite curious the way that the cross media bar works kind of independently of the PlayStation on this, rather than being part of the PlayStation system. It kind of works as an overlay and part of the TV aspect rather than the PlayStation itself. So bit of a curiosity there. Anyway, we don't need that right now. So we're on the PlayStation channel now. Obviously, this is a PAL system, and it was designed for PAL territories and PAL games. I think you can play copied DVDs in this, if I'm not mistaken. So you can run DVD videos from multiple regions on this. Don't quote me on that though, because I've not actually tested it. There's not a lot of advice available about this system online because it's a PAL system that came out quite late in the day. Um, yeah, I will do, Benny. Thanks, mate. Just watch this video back when you get a chance. Um, because this system came out quite late, a lot of the functions it was intended for are kind of a sign of their times, if you know what I mean. They'd already passed. This came out in 2010, which is at the very back end, so a lot of these things are kind of pointless. Why they even bothered with copy protection is kind of strange. Seems like they actually put in extra measures, and one of the biggest things they did was the motherboard revision in this is one of the final revision motherboards and firmware that was released for the PlayStation 2 Slim. Now, what that means is, for anybody who's familiar with hacking and modifications, is that this is one of the few systems, unfortunately, that can't use the Freemut boot system. Now, I've covered the Freemut boot system in past videos. I did a tutorial, so if you haven't seen it before, go back to my YouTube channel, look back at some of my older videos. I've covered using Freemut boot as a system using a memory card and USB stick. I've also covered using the free HD boot system, which is where you plug in a physical 3.5-inch hard drive using the network adapter on a fat PS2, which is a lot more elegant because you don't need a memory card sticking out the front, and you're not limited to the slow speeds of the USB 1.1 sockets on the system. So I've covered those in detail, and I've given tutorials how to do it. Now, I've been after one of these TVs for a couple of years, and what actually put me off when I actually started shopping for one properly was I discovered that obviously it uses this motherboard revision that doesn't support Freemut boot. But obviously what you're seeing here is what I've shown in the other videos, which is Open PS2 Loader, which is the USB/hard drive loading system for games that I've used on my other hack systems. Now, the reason I'm able to do that is because I believe it was around November last year, some bright spark out there took a look at the situation, and they were looking to try and find ways to hack the last few unhackable PS2s. And they finally cracked it. Just recently, there was a video that went up talking about you can actually now hack the final few unhackable PS2s using some kind of disk exploit. So you can put in a burned disk, and it will actually execute a payload using a DVD exploit on the actual in the PS2's firmware to allow you to run unsigned code from the disk, and using that you can then create a FreeMate boot memory card for your system, and use that as a boot disk. So you could actually use this entire system on those unhackable ones. Um, you could actually do that with this now, but just before that came out, somebody actually came out with this new mod called the Fortuna. Now the Fortuna hack works a little bit different to FreeMate boot. I don't know the technical aspects of it because I'm not a coder and I don't understand all the hacking that they do. But basically, FreeMate boot, you would use a PlayStation 2 with a mod chip, and you would insert a certain payload on a disk, or you would use a swap magic trick, and you would force basically a payload to execute from a disk and install on a memory card. Once you got it done, you could then use a already modded system to create other FreeMate boot memory cards to use on other systems. Unfortunately, that doesn't work for this specific board revision of the Slim PS2, which is one of the last of the lines. It doesn't actually work. Sony actually put in a block to stop that exploit, even though that exploit didn't come out until the very end of the PS2's life cycle. I think Sony realised it was a problem and kind of patched it very, very late in the day. And unfortunately, with this board revision being that, it means that the FreeMate boot didn't work. Fortuna goes about in a slightly different way, and I'm just going to show that now. So if I reset my system, I will put links to all this in the description of the video afterwards and give a kind of semi-tutorial on how to do it. But I'm just going to show you how it works. So you install your Fortuna memory card, which is very similar to doing the FreeMate boot memory card, and you install a certain custom firmware on the PlayStation 2 memory card. And then what you do is you start up your PS2 like normal, as you can see there. And I will just show you actually while we're here. If I go into version, you can see there the console's got the custom model assignment of PX300-1. That's obviously the PlayStation 2 custom model ID number, and it uses the 2.0 PlayStation driver and the 3.11e DVD player firmware. It's some combination of these and the browser 1.4 that actually creates the block that stops FreeMate boot from working. But this Fortuna exploit works in a different way by exploiting a corrupted game save instead to launch. So what we do is we go into browser, and you would have your memory card browser just like normal. So the memory card comes up there, but then when we go into the memory card, you'll see there we've got a bunch of folders. These are actually like configuration files for the other things I've got installed on there. But at the very top there, we've got a corrupted data. That is the Fortuna exploit. And what it does, it modifies the system date and does something else funky that creates a delay that allows them to inject code in the next step. So we go back from there, and you'll see that white spot there blipped in the middle of the screen twice. And when I now click back from here, you'll see the screen do something a little bit funky, and we have the ulaunch elf execute, and that's what the Fortuna mod does. Rather than going into the FreeMate boot menu like you would have seen on the FreeMate boot videos that I've done, it goes into ulaunch elf, and then from the ulaunch elf you can actually launch any other types of code from there. So you can browse, memory card 1, memory card 2, hard disk drive. Obviously we can't have a hard disk drive in this because it's a slim PS2. You can go over using the network. You can actually inject code over the network, but obviously I've got a USB flash drive installed there, very small one, so it doesn't stick out the front. It's actually an integral 128GB USB drive, and if I browse to that, it should load up. There we go, and you can see that on the memory card I've got the folder structure here for Open PS2 Loader with your art files, the CD images, the DVD images, the broken down larger 4GB files, configuration files, and of course the apps. And then, of course, all the apps I've got on here are very similar. You can actually launch the Freemut menu system from here, but it's a little bit pointless because you already got the Fortuna hack. The thing you're going to care about the most, of course, is launching PS2 games from a flash drive. So the important ones there are Open PS2 Loader. Now, for this system, I've decided to bypass the classic ones that I've used, which is OPL 0.92 and 0.93, and I've actually gone to a very like the latest build. There's been a lot of changes made, and they've integrated a lot of plugins and stuff now into Open PS2 Loader that makes it a much more versatile system. Um, and so I've set it up now. Even though I interrupted the boot process just, you can set up ULaunch Elf to auto launch an app on startup. And what I'd actually got it to do is to auto launch the latest version of LPL, which is this. So if I hit that now, see the screen flash a few times, and the new splash screen for the 10th anniversary edition of Open PS2 Loader. This release, I believe, came out sometime in May, and that's the latest stable version to use. Now, the reason I've gone for this is because there's some specific features I want to use just for the PlayStation 2 TV, and that's coming on to something I spoke about earlier. So you can launch your games like normal. You've got you've got your PS2 games on here in CD formats like Crazy Taxi, or in DVD formats like Dragon's Lair, the Grand Theft Autos, and things like that. You'll also notice on this menu I've got two versions of some games, and I'll explain why in just a second. One of the reasons I've used this latest version of PS2 Open PS2 Loader is they've made a few changes, and you should notice if you go back and compare my old PS2 video, just how clear the picture is on this and how clear the menus are. What they've done is they've actually added support for slightly different screen modes, made the text a lot clearer to read because obviously you get distortion and artifacting with a composite signal, and this is designed for most people using a PS2 with composite inputs. Now, people don't realise, but the PS2 in this is actually hooked up in the most ideal way possible. It's actually using an internal component input, which obviously the original PS2s did support, but the cables just run up the stem of the TV straight into the TV. So it is actually hooked up using the sync on green method, which is supposed to be unique to Sony TVs. Obviously, that's perfect for Sony for this system because it's a Sony Bravia TV along with a Sony console. So they've hooked it up internally with the component cabling, so you're actually getting the best image possible. Um, there are a few caveats, however. The TV itself does support multiple different types. So it supports PAL 50 Hz, PAL 60 Hz, NTSC 60 Hz, and it does support a few progressive modes as well. However, on the PlayStation channel, which you can't change, they've put in certain restrictions that don't allow you to run NTSC region games. When I first set up this exploit, I actually had to go onto the forums because I used a lot of the ROM dumps I was using for my other PlayStations. Now, when you install other region games on a UK PAL PlayStation with Freemut boot or free HD boot, you can run any region game, no problem. In fact, the PSX DVR, I use it to run both Japanese games, American games, and one or two PAL games, just to show that it can display all of them, as long as you've got the right telly that can display those signals. However, there is a restriction on this, and when you do try to load most foreign games, they just don't load. You get a black screen or a white screen, and I thought the mod just didn't work. I thought that restriction was there. No one had tested Open PS2 Loader with a PlayStation 2 TV. So I'm kind of the test bed for this online as far as this exploit goes. And I discovered pretty quickly that it was best, even though you do get a little bit of screen compression and you don't get the best picture over 50 Hz signal. It is coded to only launch PAL games natively. So I've downloaded the PAL versions of a lot of these games. Now, the reason I've got a couple of versions on here is because even though it doesn't support NTSC games, a lot of PlayStation games, because it was in this weird transition period, were actually made to support multiple TV modes. Now, even though there's an option in the PlayStation 2 menu to launch PlayStation games in, you can change the system to be in 4:3 aspect or widescreen. Most games don't actually read that flag that's built into the BIOS. So people who made the games actually hard coded in different ways of accessing other display modes. And even though they're technically not native PAL signals, quite a few PAL games actually allow you to launch strange signals like PAL 60 Hz, because you'll have a 50 or 60 Hz option on startup. Some games, like Gran Turismo 4 that I've got here, the UK version doesn't do it, but the American version does. Actually allows you to run it in 1080i, so 1080 interlaced, which is full HD, which no other PlayStation 2 game does, and was very unusual for the time. And the picture on that is absolutely crystal. But a lot of games, they did only put in a 480p mode, but even though it's like a lower resolution, being in progressive makes the display picture so much better. And thankfully, even though it only supports PAL, it does support progressive. Now, it can support 576p, which is 576 progressive mode, as well as 480p. But in 480p mode, you do get a little bit of overscan at the top and bottom because of the way it crops the image. It's not a big deal because most of the display things on the games tend to fall in the safe region anyway. But that progressive mode makes the flicker just go away. It's not probably not going to be visible on camera too much, but I'm going to try and demonstrate the differences. It will display in 480p and 576p, and I will mess about with some of the settings manually on my remote to show you what the differences are. Now, the reason I've got multiple versions of some games is because only about, I don't know, about 40% of all PlayStation 2 games had some kind of progressive mode you could activate on startup or menu option. A lot of the others didn't. However, some clever people have worked out that by injecting a little bit of code, you can actually do it using action replay on a standard PS2. But you can actually take these patches, patch the ROMs, and you can actually patch pretty much 80% of the PS2 library to run in widescreen natively. And thankfully, I've gone online and realised loads of my favourite games have got patches available. Now, when I actually said that I got this TV, some people said, some of my aspect ratio Nazi friends out there, they actually said it's a bit pointless, having a widescreen TV when most PS2 games were 4:3 aspect. And yet, I said, well, there's a lot of games that are in widescreen. They said, well, not that many. And playing 4:3 aspect games stretched sucks. Now, although that's never bothered me, I thought, well, since I've now got this system and it's got an integrated widescreen TV, why crop it down? So what I've done is I've downloaded patches for a load of games, and to get the most out of this system, I've downloaded patched versions and actually patched the ISOs. So a lot of games that didn't natively support it now actually display in widescreen. There's no detriment to the actual performance of the games for increasing the resolution in that way. And some of them might have the odd bug here and there because they're not meant to run that way. Or, for example, the menus may still run in a kind of stretched mode, but that doesn't really matter. For a lot of games, what it does, it extends the playfield to display things that would otherwise be off screen. Or in the case of games like Grand Theft Auto, Grand Theft Auto did actually have widescreen modes in the options, but the way it does it is by zooming a 4:3 aspect ratio picture. So if you can picture this frame that I'm in right here, rather than it extending the sides like that to give more play field and still see the same top and bottom, all it does is zoom in the 4:3, so the top and bottom are actually cut off, just so it brings the sides in line. So it wasn't a true widescreen mode. What these widescreen patches do is they correct the FMV sequences to fully render the widescreen. They actually correct the aspect ratio of many of the on-screen elements, and it's rather than doing that stupid 4:3 zoom, it gives a true 16:9 aspect ratio. So you're seeing both the full height that it can render and the full width that the PlayStation can render instead. And I've put both versions on here just to show you what the differences are on several games. So we're going to start with something basic, and that is Crazy Taxi. This was one of the first games I ever played for the PS2, and what actually inspired me to buy a PS2 early on, because I wasn't planning on buying 6th generation consoles. I was still heavily into my PS1 around the time the PS2 came out, and but a friend of mine lent me his PS2 with Crazy Taxi, and I was blown away. So this is standard Crazy Taxi. I'm going to load up first. So we press X, it loads the config. What I actually haven't done on this just yet is you can actually set up virtual memory cards for each of the games, so it doesn't save the game files to the save files to the memory card. It saves them to the USB flash drive instead. I will do that for all the games when I finalise my list, but after this video I'll be taking off the non-widescreen versions, renaming everything properly, and then all that will be on here is like patched ROMs, and then I will create virtual memory card files. If I create them now, I'll have to go back and delete them and recreate them afterwards. So I'm not going to create memory card saves for any of these. So obviously this is in 4:3. At the moment it's stretching the picture because I've got it in smart mode. If I show you what it should look like, this is the 4:3 aspect when it loads in a second. Takes a little bit longer to load, of course, off a USB flash drive. When I was showing Free HD boot, you could see how fast the loading was, because it's reading straight from the hard drive at full speeds, faster than disk. The USB ports on a PS2 are only USB 1.1, which is a little bit slower. So it takes a little bit longer to load a game, and sometimes FMV and stuff will stutter. That is the drawback of USB. But if you use a good USB flash drive, that actually occurs a lot less. So I tend to try and buy decent USB flash drives for these. So we'll boot this up, and actually I'll keep the volume low on this. The reason being, I've done videos with Crazy Taxi before, and because it uses the Offspring soundtrack, it flags it for muting, which I don't really want to do on YouTube, because it's obviously copyrighted music. So I'll just turn the volume down. We won't create a memory card file, and we'll hit start. Let's go to arcade, play with arcade rules, and you can see obviously this is a 4:3 letterboxed aspect ratio. So this is what the game looks like normally. You notice the how the characters look. Notice the way the backgrounds are. Notice what the playfield looks like. And we'll just let it boot up. Sorry, it's shaking in my hand. I've got the motors on. And obviously the game looks like this. This is familiar Crazy Taxi for most people. Now, if I just pause that for a second, if I hit this, which stretches it into widescreen, go to smart, you can see obviously that stretches the image quite a lot, which not only makes everything look a little bit fatter and slightly out of proportion, but because of the way it stretches the pixels, it actually blurs the image somewhat, so it doesn't look very crystal clear. On some games that really doesn't matter. I could probably play Crazy Taxi like this and not be bothered by it. In fact, I've played Crazy Taxi like this on console for years and it's never troubled me. Racing games, it doesn't tend to matter too much. However, as far as navigating goes, if you've got a widescreen on a driving game, it does allow you to see a lot more of what you're turning into when you turn a sharp corner, for example. So if I get to the bottom of the hill here and just kind of show that, to the bottom of the hill, drop off this first customer. Obviously, as I turn here, I can't see a lot over to the left hand side. Turning left and right, you can't really see what you're turning into, and it can be quite, on frantic games like this, you could end up turning into stuff you don't realise is there, or missing customers. Now, if I reset this, And we'll just go through obviously the exploit process again and let it reload. So we go into browser, go into the memory card, come back out the memory card, come back out of it again. Should now launch the U-Launch Elf, and it should auto load open PS2 Loader. There we go. After 2 seconds, just give it a second to load up the menu, and this time we're going to load a patched ROM. Now this is a ROM. I've taken the standard PAL Crazy Taxi ISO and run it through a patching tool, which I'll put all the details in description afterwards, and it will apply a patch which has been modified from an action replay code, which actually enables the widescreen. So you can see a Crazy Taxi W on here, and it's exactly the same game except it's been patched for widescreen telly. And when it loads up, you should immediately see the difference. So all of this looks pretty normal so far. Let's give it a second to load. Like I say, USB loading can take a fair bit longer than, DVD loading can. But the Sega logo is now in the proper aspect ratio, even though it extends to the full widescreen. I think the Acclaim logo is still stretched. They haven't actually corrected that because there's no real need to. But when I go into the game now, it'll ask me about memory cards first. Today. Always takes quite a long time by USB. It's a bit strange after using the hard drives, it does take longer, but still, it's not as painful as tape loading after all, is it? If I go into this, select my language, skip the memory card, and then we start the game, select arcade mode, like before. Now you'll notice the characters are in their correct aspect ratios, so they're not made fatter. But if you look towards the right hand side of the screen over here, there's actually an extra bit of screen over there. So it's still rendering the 3D graphics in the proper aspect ratio. It's just stretching the background bitmaps to the full widescreen, which obviously when we go into the game now, you can see that even though the HUD, so the score up here and the time are stretched, and obviously the little reverse and forward gear are actually stretched, the playfield and all the 3D rendering up front, the car, are all in the proper aspect ratio. And what we're actually getting now is a full widescreen playfield. So we're getting true widescreen for an otherwise 4:3 aspect game where you have no options to go widescreen, and you can see that the picture is a lot clearer because it's not stretching the polygons, it's not stretching the textures, it's rendering those properly like it should, and there's no detriment to the performance. It's still performing well. There's actually no glitching on this game. Some games a little bit of glitching off the side of the screens, but none of the games I care about. And it's rendering all the way up to the full 16:9 aspect ratio. So for some of you naysayers out there who said, what is the point in this TV? Now, thanks to this hack, and this just shows why, console modding and hacking for old consoles is so cool today, and why it's such a good thing for preservation. You're getting more out of these games than you would have been able to do back in the day, because you wouldn't have been able to plug any kind of action replay device into this. I know it was done with a disc, fair enough, but you wouldn't have been able to do it with a game like this back in the day. And obviously it needed that hack in order to be able to play it in widescreen. So I've now got Crazy Taxi in widescreen, which is fucking awesome. And obviously this extends to a lot more games than Crazy Taxi. And I will turn the volume back up now because we shouldn't be dealing with any kind of copyrighted music. So go back into it, we launch a game, and I'll show you a couple of others where it takes effect. Yeah, it's a slightly longer process to get the exploit to load, obviously with Fortuna than it is with Freemap Boot, but it's no more painful. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, an extra few seconds is nothing. The fact that I can actually load games from USB flash, I'm only interested in doing that these days. Convenient. I love my old systems. I've said a million times before, but I'm only a hardware collector. I don't collect games anymore, and most of my games I backed up years ago onto hard drive anyway. But now I've got a way of loading them on systems that up until just 6 months ago, you couldn't do this with a PS2 TV, and nobody else on YouTube has demonstrated this on a PS2 TV yet. And thankfully, in the last couple of weeks since I bought this, I've worked out how to do it. So we'll show a couple of other games where it comes into effect. So let's go with Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. That's a good one because that's one of the, I think it was the best selling game for the system. And again, first of all, we'll load the standard game. So this is the raw Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and I'll switch it to proper aspect ratio first, just to show you what it looks like, and then what it looks like when it's stretched. So we're in 4:3 aspect now. Let's give it a few seconds to load up. It's good actually. These little loading times give me plenty of opportunity to take a sip at the drink. Much needed on a warm day like this. Oh, good old Rockstar. I'll tell you what, the Grand Theft Auto series has done brilliantly over the years. I'm so pleased, that these series is carried on. This era when the Grand Theft Auto games came out, I mean, they really did change, they set a standard in sandbox type games. Fantastic game. So we'll get into the game. We'll start it up just so you can see the intro FMV sequences and what they look like when they're stretched, and what the playfield looks like, and then I'll show you the widescreen patched version and show you what that looks like. So this is your typical loading here. Can you hear that okay? No problem, Benny. I hope you're liking this, guys. You haven't been chatting much. I'm hoping I'm just saying stuff that's of interest to you. Like I say, I am breaking a bit new ground here, so hopefully a lot more people will see this afterwards. A few of my friends have told me that they've actually got this system, so it'll be interesting for them to see now that you can actually run, copies on here effectively. So this is the standard intro with CJ, and you can see, obviously now it's gone into the full stretched 4:3 aspect mode, and you can see that CJ looks a little bit fat and a little bit stretched. You can tell the way it's stretching the polygons. We'll just fast forward this bit here now, jump into the first mission, which is to just basically cycle home. Obviously the load times on a game like this are a little bit more noticeable because there's a lot more load sequences between stages and between missions and things like that. But yeah, Officer Tenpenny dumps you off in the middle of the wrong neighbourhood and you have to cycle home. So here we go. This is a standard 4:3 aspect perspective, and it's been stretched into widescreen. If I just jump back to 4:3 to show you what it should look like. So that's what it should look like. That's how CJ should look. That's how skinny he is. And if you notice the shape of the mini-map in the left-hand corner and the HUD at the top right-hand corner, you'll see how they stretch when we actually stretch the screen in a second. And you can see the kind of playfield you can actually view left and right. If I just switch that back to 16:9 now, or smart mode on this, you can see how much it stretches that image. Like I say, not necessarily problematic, but it does make the image a lot more fuzzy, so to speak. And that's not ideal when you're playing the game for any length of time, because it just makes, it just hurts your eyes after a while. Although I'm not one of these people who needs crystal clear pictures and super HD and things like that, I do like to be able to see things fairly clearly, and unfortunately over time that stretching does kind of wear on your eyes a little bit, especially my 40-year-old eyes. It's not ideal. So anyway, that's how it looks as standard and how it looks stretched. If I now reset this, well, actually, before I do, if I go to options now, I think I can go into options from here. Controller, audio, gallery, display. There we go. You can see there's an option there to turn widescreen on. If I now turn widescreen on and I go back and back again, you can see it has actually stretched it. It has actually stretched it, and CJ now looks his usual slim self. But what it's actually done to achieve that widescreen image is it actually cut off the top and bottom of the image and zoomed it in. So ordinarily here, I should be able to see CJ's feet clearly and a little bit of screen at the bottom of the screen as well. But all it's done is zoomed it in, so it's not true widescreen. So we're seeing less of the sky and everything. So if I now reset this, and we'll go back in. So again, forgive the load times, guys. I know I'm kind of jumping from one place to another, but I'm just trying to show people, what the differences are and the reason I've done these changes. Come out of that and out again, and it should auto load it. It did actually fail to load it a bit earlier on. I don't know whether I need to defragment my USB drive. Sometimes you need to do that. When you do the FreeMap boot and you use a USB flash drive, because the read and write cycles are a little bit slower, it does say to ensure that all of your ISOs are fully defragmented, because sometimes it can stop the exploits from loading, it can stop the games from loading. It's not that important when you actually use an internal hard drive on a fat PS2, but when you're using a memory card and a USB flash drive, you have to ensure that your ISOs are fully defragmented. So that's a point you should note if you're going to try and do this. So now we'll go back to Grand Theft Auto, and we'll now launch the widescreen modded version. Turn up a bit more. And you should notice pretty much straight away yeah, okay, skip that. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that text there isn't stretched like it was in the previous videos showing just. And all these sections are in the correct aspect ratio as well. ...2004, man. I can't believe it goes back that far, you know what I mean? When it goes back further than that, it was actually 2001 was Grand Theft Auto 3. But listening to that loading music there, the amount of hours I put into this the year I had it was unreal. And many times since, every so often I'll go back and play these. I mean, I've played this on my handhelds, on the mobile. I had the kind of the upscaled version for the Ouya because that was based on the PC version. And I've gone back and played this game a million times since. Still can't beat the PS2 original there. So when it goes into the FMV sequence here now, introducing CJ, you should see the difference straight away. So there you go. CJ now doesn't look all stretched out and fat. He's actually in his proper aspect ratio. The amount of screen you see is slightly wider. The picture, I mean, you can't tell on this camera, unfortunately, but the picture is a lot clearer on this now. You see a lot more of the screen here when you're looking at the overhead of the taxi. And we'll just skip the next bit and get into the game, and you'll see that the aspect ratio has been correctly stretched to 16:9 aspect now. There we go. So now we've got a true 16:9 aspect. You can see that I'm running around. Carl is his proper slim self. He's not all stretched out and fat. You can see by where the actual text is on screen, it's slightly higher up the screen. Even though the HUD aspects, because they're basically pixelized overlays for the screen, they're both stretched in the bottom left and top right hand corner, but they have been repositioned to the corner, but it's the center of the screen that gives it away. Previously, you could only just see the bottom of Carl's feet, because the way it had done it is it had zoomed the 4:3 aspect picture, which would only be, I don't know, about that wide perhaps. And by doing that, it actually cuts off about the top inch and the bottom inch of the screen, which is why we could only see the very tips of Carl's feet, whereas now we can see about an inch behind him. Now, obviously, when you're playing some of the missions that require you to look around corners or drive, and some of the driving missions on the earlier Grand Theft Autos can be a nightmare because you get like random traffic spawns out of nowhere. Obviously, this way now, you can see a lot more what's coming from the left and right down the streets. If you've got targets off the side of your screen, you can now see them a lot earlier. Let's head home. But you can see just how much more of the screen we can see. A lot more of the sky at the top of the screen. Yeah, absolutely love this game. Love it. So yeah, so that has now been properly, correctly aspect ratio fixed. And there's no slowdown or artifact or anything like that, so it's perfect. And it applies to loads of games as well. All of the Rockstar series I've applied the patches to. One of them, which sadly slipped me by back in the day, was Bully, otherwise known as Canis Caedum Edit in the PAL territories for some reason. But it's basically Grand Theft Auto set in a school, and you play a bad kid who's in this private school, and you have to make yourself the daddy of the school. And I'm actually going to play that through now in widescreen on here because I think it'll be interesting to play it through for the first time in that aspect ratio. And I'm going to talk about a few more aspects of Open PS2 Loader while I'm here because Open PS2 Loader has had a lot of changes over the last couple of years, and I really should update the Open PS2 Loader I've got installed on my other PlayStation 2s. Obviously, I've got about 4 or 5 different PlayStation 2s now, all running slightly different versions. I'll probably update them to run this version instead. This version actually takes a few seconds longer to load than the older versions do, but it's got a lot more features. So, you can see I've done it with Bully, I've done it with Capcom versus SNK2, done it with Crazy Taxi. Dragon's Lair 3D actually has a native wide mode in there. That is fine anyway, so you don't need to modify that. Ferrari F355 Challenge, another brilliant arcade racer, came out around the same time as Crazy Taxi. I think that's actually got a native widescreen mode anyway, so that's not a problem. But there's other games like Gran Turismo 4 that's actually got the fix in place. But some of these games have got better modes kind of already in them, so they don't actually need patching. One of those, and I'll show you now, is actually Outrun 2006. So this game isn't patched at all. But when you load this game, you actually get a few different options, and I'll show you the different options just to show you what a difference it makes. Yeah, this is one of the few games that actually takes advantage of all different screen modes. How's it going, Mr. Rowland? Yeah, okay. This might interest you, this video actually, Dave. It's getting a bit more technical on things. Watch it back and you'll see what I mean, but I'm showing some serious differences here with hardware we're all familiar with. So when you load this, you've got a few options. You've got 50 Hz mode, which is standard PAL 50 Hz mode. You've got 60 Hz mode, which isn't NTSC, it's PAL 60 Hz, which is a strange signal, but it means we can actually display it on here. And then we've got 60 Hz progressive, so this has actually got 480p. Now 480p on this game makes a massive difference, and you're going to see why. Even though I can actually load it in 50 Hz mode or 60 Hz mode and enable widescreen mode within the game to actually stretch it to full aspect, neither of them compare to 60 Hz progressive mode. 60 Hz progressive 480p looks amazing on this screen, and it moves along at such a pace. It's so crystal clear. You know, it's running at, I think it runs at 60 frames per second when it's actually doing that, and there's no tearing or artifacting. It looks brilliant. So what I'll do first is I'll quickly load 50 Hz mode, and I'll put it back into 4 to 3 aspect first so you can see what the differences are. So we load in 50 Hz mode, and obviously letterboxes the screen to the center. And we'll get into the game. Now this game, for people who don't know, 2006 Coast to Coast, I'll turn it down slightly. You'll notice the audio artifact in there. That is a result of it reading from USB, unfortunately. Thankfully, it doesn't happen during games, so all the in-game music is perfect. So we hit start. Yeah, we'll just continue. We don't want to create a save file. So create a license, yada yada yada. Yeah, this game, it's called Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast. It's actually a combined version of the arcade Outrun 2, which is a fucking brilliant game, and a new mode which uses different car stats, you can pick different players, and has got loads more courses and options that you can do. You can replay sections and things like that, so that there's loads of different modes you can go to. We're going to go to SP mode just so I can quickly show you the differences. So we go to SP mode, and then you'll see we've got select your car. Now before I actually select my car, actually I will select my car, sorry. And we'll go with the classic Testarossa because that is the car from the original Outrun, which I absolutely love. You actually get a few more options in arcade mode on this as well, which is really cool. I haven't played this much, but I've played the arcade mode, you know, the actual arcade version a million times, and I love it. I'm probably going to play it a little bit more on here now. You can actually play this game by System Link on the PAL and the NTSCU versions. So we might set that up as a system link with some force feedback wheels for the next revival. So we'll have the Testarossa, but I'm going to have it in sunrise yellow or sunset yellow. We'll have it in automatic, outrun mode. And what's quite cool is you can have the new remix music, or if we jump over, we can actually have the classic soundtrack from the original Outrun, which I think is brilliant because Magical Sound Shower is fucking awesome. And to be honest, either version is great. But yeah, we'll load up the newer version. And right, what I'll do is I'll show you what the different aspect ratios look like, and then I'll show you it in progressive mode, and you'll see, you know, what a difference it makes. Hopefully, it will pick up on camera. Doesn't pick up. It picks up brilliantly to my eye. It doesn't always pick up on camera. So I mean, it moves along well, but there is a little bit of motion blurring going on because it's using an interlaced video signal, and that means the draw distance, things in the draw distance, actually look a little bit more grainy and kind of creep up on you a little bit. And as it's moving along now, I think it's only moving at 30 frames a second. I mean, it still moves at a brilliant pace. It's a brilliant game. Controls well. But you can't see too much off to the sides. I mean, you get a pretty wide angle on this, but you don't see too much to the sides. If I now pause that, you can actually change the settings in game, and you can actually stretch it to widescreen. But what you can see it's actually done is it actually just compresses the image, and if I return to the game, everything's all a little bit squashed. And then obviously to view it in widescreen, I then have to change the settings on my screen to go into widescreen. So you're getting like a pseudo widescreen, and it obviously is trying to correct the aspect ratio of the car models and everything like that. But being in interlace mode, like I say, you're getting quite a lot of distance artifacting, and it's only chugging along at what seems to be 30 frames per second. If we now reset this bugger, and this time what we'll do is we'll activate 480p mode. I know the Outrun soundtrack's brilliant, Dave. You're a big fan of Outrun, aren't you? Yeah, I mean the Outrun soundtracks are brilliant. Magical Sound Showers in particular, brilliant piece of composing. And we'll load it up. Fingers crossed. Yeah. Thankfully, it's loaded the exploit every time this time. I might have to take the memory card out and do a full defragment on my PC. But Open PS2 Loader does actually check for fragmentation itself as an option you can set on there. And this time when we load it, and it comes up, we'll go to it this time. And when it gives us the option this time, I'm going to select 480 progressive mode. It does shift the image over to the right hand side slightly because it's not like a true native mode that this TV should display in, but we can correct that in the settings, so that's not a problem. So give it a second, it'll ask us what display mode we want to go with. And we'll set it to 480p. Might not show on camera, but trust me, to my eye, this makes the picture a hell of a lot clearer, and it makes the game just move along at an amazing pace. So it's now already obviously defaulted into full widescreen in the menus. Start a new license. Outrun 2SP. And you can see obviously everything's in the correct aspect ratio. That's a perfect circle there. It's already in widescreen here. We'll pick the same car. Automatic. Outrun mode. And this time we'll just go ahead with the race, and it is so much smoother. It's so much clearer. Everything seems a lot more pixel perfect. The draw distance is so much smoother, and it just seems to be moving along at a higher frame rate. I know it's not actually the case, but the way it puts the images together, it feels a lot more like the arcade version. So yeah, I mean, it's not coming across on camera, unfortunately, because the camera's only capturing a certain frame rate as it is. But in the distance there, where you can see the track going up the hill, I can clearly see the cars to my naked eye here. The way the road moves along under my eyes is a lot smoother. It just looks so much better. And you might just be able to tell on the picture there that the image is slightly shifted over to the right hand side. You notice there's a slight black border on the left. If I go into options and go to settings, you can actually correct that by just dragging the screen over like that. You can see it shifting over. Move it as far as it can go. There we go, that's centered it. Return to game, and off we go. We'll try and at least get to a couple of checkpoints if we can. I might have already bugged it up by crashing a couple of times, but yeah, I love this game, man. Whoa, I'm a little rusty. I'm used to playing on the steering wheel, I won't lie. It's cool because the arcade mode hasn't actually got slipstreaming on the arcade, but on this you've actually got slipstreaming. So you can come behind a car and just kind of sweep past and gain a little bit of extra speed. Whoa. Not power sliding actually gains you a lot more speed than power sliding does. Just not quite as fun. I think there's a couple of big corners coming up there where I will need to slide like this one. There we go, brilliant. Did it. Sweet. It's always hard to get that back end in though where it straightens out there. Go around the Ferrari Dino. Arsehole. Of course, a bit there. Whoa! That's better. Well, almost. But yeah, so that's outrunning 480 progressive mode. And you can see the pictures, the colours are nice and vivid. The detail on the cars and everything is fantastic. It's not even the greatest TV in the world. This was Sony Bravia TVs did have a pretty good display. You know, they've been good for several years, and it's the perfect TV choice for playing PlayStation, to be quite honest. So I'm glad they've paired it in the way they have, and I'm glad they didn't kind of cheap out and just connect it internally using standard composite or something, because that would have really muddied the picture. You know, made it really blurry. You'd had all that horrible composite artifacting, which sucks, that blurring. You know, the PS2 in lower resolution can look a little bit muddy to our eyes these days. It is, at least this way with the PS2 TV, you really are getting to see the PlayStation 2 at its best and kind of crossing over into that generation from the 6th to the 7th where we went from 4 to 3 CRTs right up to HD TVs. You know, the PS2 fully represents that era, and thankfully now the PS2 TV, this is the ideal way to play a PlayStation 2, should I say. So yeah, love the system. Just before I sign off with this, a couple more things I do want to show, and that's because I haven't actually shown this on my previous videos of OpenPS2 Loader, and that's a couple more features that OpenPS Loader can actually do now. And I hadn't figured out the last time I'd actually did my OpenPS2 Loader hacks. So we'll come out of that, we'll jump into it. Good stuff, Dave. I'm glad it come across well. All I was concerned about is I've actually got a pretty good webcam. I'm using my phone as like a webcam which can display HD, but when it captures and encodes through, you know, OBS and that, you get a lot of downgrading in the picture quality. It's not a direct video capture I'm doing, so it doesn't always come across that well. Thankfully, it is coming across pretty well today. I must have the lighting conditions right. I've adjusted some of the spotlights in my kitchen so you can see me better and so it doesn't glare on the screen as badly. Right, what I've actually, so in OpenPS2 Loader, I've showed some of these options before, but if you press Start, you actually get access to a load of settings here. In your settings menu, you can change a few little things. You can turn the write operations on and off. I'll actually turn that off because I don't want them there. If I ever put this out at an event, I don't want somebody deleting my frigging games, for example. So we'll leave that as it is there. You can see I've got USB game fragmentation check on, and that allows it to actually read the game a lot faster. I've got it to automatically load the USB games on startup. You can do a few other things. You can change the theme. I quite like this theme, but there are a few others you can choose from. You can change the language. You can change how fast the menu scrolls. You can turn off the artwork if you want it to load and display a lot faster. I like the artwork. I like something a bit more graphical out of my user interface. You know what I mean? It's a GUI for a reason. And you can see I've actually set there. I think that's 576 512p. But yeah, I've set up like basically the best display for OPL that I can. That's why it's nice and clear on this screen. If you go back and look at any of my other PS2 videos I've done with this hack, you'll see that the text is quite blurry because I'm using standard TVs and I haven't set it up to specifically display well on one TV, because I'm always going to plug it into different TVs. On this, I set it in a display resolution that this TV really likes, and you can see obviously I've set it to widescreen on. You can do a few other things like parental lock. Network is pointless. One bad thing about OPL, for those of you who've used it, unfortunately, even though you can load games over a network rather than using a hard drive, so you could plug this into your PC and load your games that way, the networking features of games don't work. So you can't, for example, set up a load of these with a racing game and then use a router and then connect those all together for multi-link games. That's the only caveat of Open PS2 Loader. I would have thought after all these years they'd have found a way to re-enable the network features, but they haven't found a way to do that just yet. So hopefully at some point in the future they will do, because it'd be great to get a load of these linked up and play some linked games. You know, for example, some of these racing games patched into widescreen. Be brilliant if we could get a system link going of those games. You can upload over the network, update over the network. Most of it's pointless stuff. But you've also got a few other options. So if I press triangle on any one of these games here, you can see we get a load of other settings we can mess with. These are the features that have been integrated now into Open PS2 Loader that weren't necessarily there before. So cheat settings, I think, were always there. You actually have to add a cheat file, a .cht cheat file, which are basically a series of action replay codes you can put in. If you can download them on the internet, copy them over as text files. It will read them, and then you can actually select and just flag certain cheats to be on or off. I haven't done that because there's not a lot of PS2 games I really want to play with cheats, and the games that I do, like Grand Theft Auto, you can do it with a key command anyway. And it's just something else to kind of take up space on the USB drive. Your space is limited as it is, so you don't want to add too much that's unnecessary. But yeah, you can add cheats and turn those on and off. The most interesting thing you've got on here, which has been added, virtual memory card I covered before. Basically, rather than needing to save the games to an actual physical memory card, you can set each individual game up to set up a virtual memory card, and you can save like an infinite number of saves, well, as much space as you've got as game saves as you want, directly on the USB drive. And that's what when I actually fully configure this and put all the games on here I finally want, that's what I will do. I will create a virtual memory card for each game, and that way it will read and write to the USB drive rather than the memory card, which has only got 8 megabytes of space. But one of the best things I've added is GSM. Now this is I think it's graphic selector mode, and basically what you can actually do is, even though I've actually used patched ISOs for this, some games you can actually patch on the fly. So from this you can actually enable like GSM mode, and then what you can do is you can actually pick what display mode you want to go into. So 60 Hz progressive, 60 Hz interlaced, 50 Hz interlaced, PAL 60 Hz, which is obviously one of the strange ones we talk about. You can have it display in the resolution HD version of for PlayStation games. It's a little bit more complex to set that up, but yeah, you can do that for PlayStation 1 games. And you can actually have it upscale to higher resolutions like 720 and HD, full HD 1080i. Unfortunately, I can tell you now that it doesn't work on very many games at all. And with this being a slight anomaly that doesn't like anything other than PAL signals as standard, GSM isn't ideal. If you're running a normal PS2 though, with a TV that likes all those different changes, on your normal PS2, if you use this latest version of Open PS2 Loader, you can patch your games on the fly, and you can force higher resolutions. I think you can force widescreen on certain games this way as well, but I don't actually need that feature on this version. The reason I have got this version is because it's actually improved support for PS1 games. Now, I didn't show this before on Open PS2 Loader because I hadn't fully worked out how to do it. The PlayStation 2, of course, natively will play PlayStation 1 games as well as PlayStation 2 games. and the compatibility is pretty much 99%. Um, this works a little bit differently. It doesn't do it using the internal hardware. It does it using a form of CD system emulation. So unfortunately, the compatibility isn't that high. It's only about 50% of games work this way. And I'll show you what they look like to show you where it does and doesn't work. But I've now finally worked out how to do it. What you basically have to do is you have to use a program called Pops Loader, and you can download popsloader.elf, put that into your apps on your memory card, and then in Open PS2 Loader, you can select it to display PS1 games once you've actually converted them. And then what you need to do is you need to take bin and Q file PS1 games. They have to be clean dumps, else they won't work. And you use a program called Q to Pops. And what that will do is it will convert the Q and bin file into a .vcd file. And VCD is the format that Pops Loader needs in order to play PS1 games using this menu. Like I say, it's not ideal because the compatibility is not super high, but it is a way of playing PS1 games from a flash memory device without needing a PS1 and a PSIO, which is kind of expensive. Sadly, some of the main games don't work, I've discovered, and there is a compatibility list somewhere. So some of the main games that don't work include the entire Ridge Racer series. They don't work properly at all, and I'll show you what happens in just a second. But other fantastic games do work, or they'll work with minor glitches that you may or may not be able to live with. So games that do work perfectly are the Resident Evil series, which I'm really pleased about because I fucking love the Resident Evil games. And that basically means that I can have every Resident Evil from 1 up until 4 playable on one PS2, which is really cool. In fact, I'll show you one of these first just to show you that it does work. So we'll load up Nemesis. And again with these, because they work slightly different to the PS2 games, you can save your games on this and you don't need a PS1 memory card. When you choose to save a game, it will automatically save a save file on your USB drive, so you can save as many games as you want as long as you've got room for them. But yeah, it doesn't do it using the native inbuilt PS1 backwards compatibility that a PlayStation 2's got. It uses some kind of combination of that and a CD emulation, and that's why some games don't run properly, because the way PlayStation games were coded, they depended on specific CD timings in order to load the graphics or the sound, and unfortunately it doesn't work. So there's a lot of games where that just doesn't work properly. Obviously, this is playing in 4:3 aspect stretched at the moment. I don't really care about that. But the picture is still absolutely mint. If I jump back to 4:3 aspect, in fact, it should look a little bit clearer. And you can see just how good a picture it actually is. Resident Evil 3 will always be my favourite Resident Evil game. And like I say, the FMV all works perfectly, all displays properly. And thankfully, because the FMV files aren't as big in a PlayStation 1 game, you don't get any of the skipping that you get on PS2 games when it's reading from a USB flash drive. So all this is running exactly as it would on a PS1, or if read from a disc. This is my last escape. Last escape was actually the subheading for the Japanese version. And like I say, this is just displaying perfectly, exactly as the PAL version did. Whatever the controls are, I can't. I'm trying to use the analog sticks. I forgot this game doesn't actually use the analog sticks. This is a little bit slower than the NTSC version. I haven't actually seen if NTSC PS1 games work on here. Obviously NTSC PS2 games don't work on here, but I don't know if NTSC PS1 games work. I might run that test after this video, to be honest. But the PAL games, to be honest, come the PS1 era anyway, there wasn't a massive difference between them anyway, so I'm fine with it. September 28th, D-Late. Somehow I'm still alive. Love this game. So that's an example of a game working perfectly anyway. The little bit of polygon artifact in there is just how the PS1 version looked. So that works perfectly. However, some games don't fare as well, unfortunately. And I'll just show you a couple of those that don't work. No problem, Adrian. You've missed quite a bit, mate, so by all means watch it back. I'm nearly at the end now, so if you guys have missed anything on this video, go back and watch it. It does make for interesting viewing because I've shown just how many different, display possibilities there are with a PlayStation, and this system, demonstrates that perfectly because it was a system designed to work in tandem with the PS2. Even though they cut corners by recycling slim PS2s to make it, they've at least paired it up in the perfect way that makes it like the definitive way to play PlayStation 2. And a 22-inch screen is plenty for a PlayStation 2 game. So we'll jump straight over. So yeah, that was Resident Evil 3. That works perfectly. Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 1 both work perfectly as well. I've got Dancing Stage Disney Mix on here because I do run the Dance Matters events. I wanted to see if the audio sync stayed. However, I think I've used a bad dump because that game doesn't load at all. So I will be editing this list quite extensively. You can download obviously the title cards, the box covers and things for this as well, so that's good. But we'll go with trusty old Ridge Racer, and unfortunately you'll see how it suffers. It does load, all of the Ridge Racer games do actually load, but when you get into the game, you see where the problems start. Hopefully they will find a way to increase the compatibility of Pops Loader as well, because it would be nice to use maybe a couple of USB drives and have one just for PS2 games and one just for PS1 games and run it that way. It'd be more ideal than having a PS2 and a PS1 separately. So you get your loading game and everything like you would have had previously. I don't know if anyone ever noticed, but on the loading Galaxian game, they don't shoot until you shoot for the first time. Back up a touch now. So the music's fine and everything on this. You can pick your car. Everything looks fine and dandy at this point. But you go into the game, and this is what you're faced with. So we've got no sound samples. We've got music, we've got no sound samples. Not even engine noise. And the graphics are just messed up beyond belief. If you know the track off the top of your head, you probably get round a lap. But it basically renders it unplayable, unfortunately. So yeah, Pops Loader not ideal. I mean, great. Like I say, I could play Resident Evil fine, no problem. But the Ridge Racer games were like some of the main games available for the system, and unfortunately, you can't play them because of this graphic problem. So yeah, that's a sad side effect. Other games are playable, but may have graphics glitches, and I'll just show you one example of that, just to show you where the middle ground lies on these. But yeah, thankfully I've worked out now how to use Pops Loader. So with some of my other PS2s, I may add a few PS1 games into the mix, just so you've got a few options. I like to put my consoles out for events, so if I've got one system that can play a few PS1 and a few PS2 games, it gives me a few options if I'm only taking a couple of systems somewhere, or at events, if people want to play multiple things and jump from one game to another, they can do it all on one system. course, the beauty of open PS2 Loader and using these hacks, as I've discussed before, it's not just the practicality, it's about preservation. When you're not using the disk drive, okay, yeah, you need to run a disk through occasionally to keep the moving parts moving, but you're saving the laser, which obviously will all burn out eventually, by not having to use the disk drives anymore. Eventually, most of the laser mechanisms will die. This way, at least, you've got a way of continuing to play those games and preserve the life of your system. So it's not just about convenience of games or downloading games or whatever. So, as an example of a game that's in the middle ground, we'll go to Soul Blade, one of my favourite fighters ever. In the whole Soul series, as it happens, this was always my favourite game. It's a little bit annoying, really, that they changed the name to Soul Calibur. It kind of went in with the storyline, but they did it because the initial game, there were some issues over using the name Soul Edge. They changed it to Soul Blade for the UK and American market because they thought we didn't know that an edge is obviously another word for a sword-like weapon. But there was also some kind of copyright issue over Soul Edge, so they switched it to Soul Calibur and they stuck with that. Annoyingly, when they numbered the sequence, they forgot that this game existed, even though this is technically the first game of that series. It went Soul Edge, Soul Calibur 2, which didn't make any sense at all. So it loads up fine, the FMV sequence and everything works fine. However, you'll start to notice the problems immediately when I get into the game. So we'll go with Wang. And when it loads up, you'll see you'll see where it starts to falter. So my Huang is missing a head, and when I step occasionally, his head reappears, or his legs or his body will disappear. Occasionally you'll get slowed down depending on what angle the camera's at. I'll see if we can at least beat him so you can see the replay camera. You can see there when he sidesteps, his legs have gone all twisted. It's kind of funky. So on the replay here, I mean, look how funky his legs are going. They're all like glitching out and going strange. He's just warping out and going weird. So that is the strange middle ground. You can or you can't live with it. It's a bit of a problem on this, and you do get a bit of slowdown on the stages that have got more complex background geometry. There you go, there's a little bit of slowdown there you normally wouldn't get on an original PlayStation, or if using that game on a disc with a PS2. Yeah, there's a lot of slowdown there. You wouldn't normally get that. It's a very similar situation with Tekken 3 as well. Tekken 1 and 2 work perfectly, but Tekken 3, unfortunately, it runs with a lot of glitches and the characters occasionally disappear. So it does kind of render it unplayable. But I mean, what I am going to do is I'm going to find a few games I really do like. I'll add them to the list. And just games that work perfectly, I'll add them to this. At least then there's a little bit of variety. So, I think that's pretty much everything, guys. I mean, there's a load of games I could show you what the differences are in widescreen. But I suppose I should just quickly mention what you're going to need in order to do this. If you've got a PS2 TV or you're looking to get one, I waited to get one until I was certain there was a solution out there to allow me to play from a USB drive, because I'm not a game collector anymore. Most of my games have gone. I don't like to burn them out and put them out to events anyway because they get scratched up. Using flash devices is it's a much better way of doing things, and obviously this was one of the few systems where it didn't work. Also, say it was unknown if there was any way of getting games to run that way. Thankfully, now thanks to the Fortuna mod, you can do that. So the things you're going to need if you want to do this yourself, few things you're going to need to know. You're going to need to go over to PSX Home and PSX Place online. And if you go to there, you'll find a load of tutorials on how to deal with this. You'll be able to download the Fortuna hack, and I can tell you now, you're going to need to download the Fortuna hack. You're also going to need to download a sys folder. Look for that specifically. It's a folder you'll need to add which the system will save your future settings to, such as your system configuration to. If you don't use that system hack, what can actually happen is your Fortuna mod can break. So if you once you've got that system hack, any system settings will save into a file inside there. If you change anything on the root of your memory card after that Fortuna hack has been on there, it will alter the date of your Fortuna hack, and the Fortuna hack won't work anymore. So bear that in mind before you start building your collection and doing everything else. So get the Fortuna hack and put that on there. Get the sys folder, which allows you to save configuration files and have it save the configuration files to there. Use a fresh memory card, and you will need an original PS2 memory card with Magic Gate. You can use the official 64 megabyte one with Magic Gate, but it doesn't matter what it is, it just needs to have Magic Gate. When I first started doing this, I didn't realise you had to have the ones that had the Magic Gate encryption, else they won't work for Freemont Boot or for Fortuna. So you'll need to get yourself an original PlayStation memory card. If you're going to do it, just get a standard 8 megabyte one. You won't really be saving anything to that besides a few configuration files. So it doesn't matter if you've only got 8 megabytes. Everything else can go onto a USB drive. You're going to need to get yourself a good USB flash drive. I'm using a 128 gigabyte flash drive. That's a low profile. Make sure you get one that's got good read and write speeds, and get a decent branded one, because if you've got any kind of lag, you'll experience real problems. I've had a few USB drives that don't work properly with the PlayStation, or crash, or they corrupt. Get a decent one. You can get big USB flash drives now for peanuts, and always go to mymemory.co.uk. Even their budget USB flash drives of high capacity are so cheap now. You can get up to a 256 gigabyte one for less than 30 quid, which is amazing value. But you probably won't need that much space to get the games you really want to play. And bear in mind that some of the big games with FMV and things like that, they're not going to run too great through USB reading anyway. So you're probably going to want to limit your game selection on there. Just get a decent high capacity one with a good brand, and get it from mymemory.co.uk, because they really are the best and the cheapest. Download the Fortuna mod, get the sys folder so it doesn't undo your Fortuna hack. Follow my procedure on here on showing you how to launch it properly. You're going to need to use PAL ISOs only if you want to run PAL games on here. Get the latest version of Open PS2 Loader. I don't know when you'll be watching this video, but if you go and look on now, I think the version I've got on here was last updated in May. Get the latest Open PS2 version. That's got all the tweaks like the VMC and GSM all integrated into it, and it'll also have the better support for PS1 games. You will need PAL games if you're going to set this up for your PS2 TV. Don't try and use NTSC-U or NTSC-J games or any kind of hacks, because they may not work. There are a few hacked games out there that use weird resolutions. Don't bother, because they probably won't read properly. Get the PAL games. Most games will release in every region anyway. You can get some foreign games to run. I think I did have some luck with a couple of Japanese games, but it's just not worth it. Get the PAL versions and you'll have no problems anyway. So Fortuna hack, install it on your memory card, set up your USB with all your information you need, put all your ISOs on there. Obviously, using a USB device, you're going to want to use Open PS2 Loader Manager for your PC. That will allow you to copy your POPs VCD games for your PS1 and your PS2 full ISOs, and your broken down PS2 ISOs for games that are over 4 gigabyte. The USB flash drive has to be formatted in FAT32 to work. That means that games over 4 gigabytes can't be transferred in one file. You'll need to use a program called USB 2.0 Util, or used to be called USB Extreme, and using that it will actually break down an ISO into 3 or 4 parts, allowing you to copy it over onto your memory card. So look for that program as well. But yeah, I'm pleased to say, thankfully, and I've been the one to suss it all out. The PS2 TV now has its own hack. I know quite a few of my friends now own this, and they've been curious how to do it. One of the guys who was watching this actually asked me about it a few weeks ago. The PS2 TV, hit or miss as to whether you can actually get one now, but I would highly recommend it if you can get it. If you like your PS2, it really is the definitive way to play it. And if you can patch the ISOs to running widescreen like I have, you're really getting the most out of it. If you look on PS2 Home and PS2 Place, like I said anyway, you'll find links on there to the actual patching program and to the patches themselves. And it's a very quick process. It takes about 10 seconds to patch a game once you've downloaded the patch and the ISO. Use that utility and patch your games to widescreen if you want to play them in widescreen, and you'll display them in the best way possible. But yeah, I hope that's been educational for you guys, and I hope that's been a good introduction into the PS2 TV. I mean, this has been a long video now, close to 2 hours, but there was a lot I wanted to cover. So for those of you who stuck with me, thank you for sticking with me for this. I will probably post a link to this video up on PSX Place anyway for anybody else who's got one. If you're looking to get one now, I mean, I paid 300 for this. Some people said they got lucky back in the day, they got it in a clearance. Fair play to you if you did. Not many people knew they existed. And being just regarded as a TV, they might have been knocked around over the years. As a gamer, though, it really is going to be something that's going to become more collectible. I think he wanted 350 for this, and I paid 300 in the end. So I did knock him down by 50 quid, but getting one of these now, you're looking between 150 and 250 on average, probably a fair bit more. But this one was in fantastic condition, came with a controller and everything, came with a couple of games, came with a couple of memory cards, and it came with a remote, which obviously is often missing with things like this. So I have got like the complete package. Glad you enjoyed it, Adrian. Sorry you've only just joined me from ZX Renew there, Pete. But yeah, watch it back. You know, if you need to follow any steps, just um, drop me a message. I'll try and put some things in the links anyway. But I've just gone over there what you're going to need to get. All the tutorials are there, and they're all very simple. It's similar to the processes for doing setting up PS2 Loader for the other systems, except instead of using Freemut Boot, you're using the Fortuna hack instead. And once you do, now you can see what's possible with the PS2 TV, or to give it its proper name, the Sony Bravia KDL22PX300 TV. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, guys. Anyway, I will share this around afterwards. Thanks for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will be back real soon.